So we're broadcasting now. Let's talk about produced and consumed tags. We talked about module defined tags, predefined tags. There is such a thing as a produced and consumed tag, which is sent across the network to two different processors. You know, a lot of people don't use those because they do take up a lot of bandwidth, because every time I make a produced or consumed tag, it has to send data repeatedly across the network. A lot of programmers would use a message statement instead and send chunks of data at regular intervals instead of doing a produced and consumed tag. But if you run across one, how would I know it was a produced or consumed tag? Well, if I look in the program and it would be listed under the tag, controller tags, under the tag type. For example, this is under edit tags. We'll see that if we go to tag properties, it would say a produced tag right there, okay? And then it would have some network, see the little thing that's grayed out that says connection? You would browse to the processor that you want that tag to go to, and then it would create it, and it would map them between there. So I typically don't go into produced and consumed tags. In my experience, a lot of people don't use them, but if you do run across them, know that's what's going on. But you will see a ton of alias tags. So we haven't talked about those, but as the name suggests, an alias tag is simply a tag that is used to represent something else. So for instance, say I'm a programmer and I don't know what my physical I/O is going to be, but I go ahead and write my program using tags, alias tags. Then whenever I figure out what the program is, I will map that alias tag to the actual I/O. Are you with me? And so an alias simply stands for something else. In your program that you've been working with, in your factory I/O simulations, you will notice that under my factory I/O simulations, it looks to me like they are connecting to these bits, these Boolean bits right here. You'll notice some of you actually got off on them. And I told you, you know, you're supposed to use ones on the sheet because we're simulating real I/O. But if you did get off on them, this is what they are. In order to simulate real I/O, I took the Boolean bits that were created for the factory I/O simulations, and I aliased them to actual I/O. And so when I activate that I/O, or that bit is activated by the software in the case of an input, it reflects itself in the I/O. Now typically you can't do that because I/O tables overwrite that data, but I paused those input cards, which lets me get away with that. So we actually are programming with real I/O. But if I want to know if a tag is an alias tag, I can go to Edit Tag menu, make sure that my alias for and base tag columns are checked, and it will simply show them. If I use something programmed with an alias tag, for instance, that one was programmed with an alias tag, and I go into the program itself, and for instance, we'll do a rung edit, and I'll just paste that in there just for an example. Do you see how it shows this small source code right here? That is the source tag. That is what it's alias for. So they're saying they're linked. If one comes on, the other one comes on, and vice versa. They are linked. And so you'll see that Boolean N0 is the tag I'm programming, but it's actually an alias for this actual input. Are you with me? So that's how alias tags work. So if you start seeing that stuff with little addresses underneath like that, problem is I can alias an alias of an alias, if I so choose. And so I can have multiple tags that are all linked together and their aliases for something else. But in later versions, they actually went through there and said, well, whatever the end result is, the base tag, we're going to display that. And so that was a good deal. They started displaying that right there by default so we could actually troubleshoot. So be aware if you start seeing that with a tag and then it shows another, maybe a local address underneath that you're looking at an alias tag. I can figure that out by right-clicking, and I can go to Edit Properties, and I'll see that that is an alias tag, and it is an alias for this one. I could actually change that. See, I can browse for different IO. I'm not going to change that, but I could. So we'll cancel that.
If it was in a program and you just want to look for an alias, you just right-click on it, go to properties, find out what it was alias to.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah. If it's not displaying, it should be displaying right here. This is the base tag. That's the real data coming in. Does that make sense? It's just alias to this one. So you need to pay attention to that.
Does it always populate that like that?
No.
An alias, or can it just be an alias, fully in zero, and not be populated with that alias too?
Depending on what version of software you're using. I'll be honest with you, it used to not do that. It used to be a problem. Now that the new versions show that, or if somebody gets into the settings, you can turn that off so it doesn't show up. So, no, it's not always a guarantee. But if I right-click on here and search and go to cross-reference, this is how I search. I'll show everywhere it's used. And a lot of times you see the reference. See that? And I start seeing base tag right here. So I can see that it is in a cross-reference. When I look, it should show up there. Does that make sense? So it should show up as a base tag for this address. Just think of it as a stand-in for something. Terms of suggest it is an alias for an IO point. And typically, most of your aliases are going to just alias output and input devices to the card. And so that's pretty much the spiel on alias and base tags. I'm going to go ahead and stop this, and we'll